as an entrepreneur, you're working different hours, longer hours, shorter hours, whatever it may be. Whenever you're not working, what are you doing? What can you find yourself doing?
Oh man. So I saw my friend with the 4 million followers. I'm like, okay, how do I do this? Because I've always hated
Right.
social media. I've always hated promoting my business on social media. It's never been my thing. And so rather than me trying to figure out all on my own, I said, oh, I did what everyone else does and goes and buys a course. And so I was in this Facebook group. I'm getting really frustrated. It's like 3 months I'm on TikTok. I don't feel like I'm getting any traction. I'm in this Facebook group with this course and everyone's talking about how they're getting 20, 40, 60,000 followers in a week.
If you know that you're really you really are passionate about a particular thing, like let's say they really wanted to be a lawyer, really wanted to be a doctor, like something that needed that education and it needed that certificate, then by all means, and I'm not discouraging college, but I always told them that was not, they didn't have to do it.
Hi, and welcome to Fuck Your Podcast. I'm your host, Emma Pardo.
And I'm Katie Martin. And on today's episode, we're really excited to have a special guest host, Mr. Braxton Wood of TikTok fame. You've probably seen him on social media. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I know, we're so excited. Katie said, I'm going to try not to fangirl while
No,
we're doing this.
I know it's so funny when you see somebody's so much content, and then you're like, oh my God. So I feel like a fan. So I'm trying not to be a TikTok fan.
I'm humbled that you would say that. Thank you.
So it's been obviously I follow both of your profiles, but I started following you. It's probably been right at a year. As far as when you really came into my algorithm, and then I followed a lot of your content, and we're kind of on, I wouldn't say opposite ends, but I do recruiting and hiring coaching, more on the company side where you're doing career coaching. But I was in this place at the company that I was with at the time. So every single piece of content at the time was just speaking to me. So I think I started following the horrible bosses, series and whatnot. And that was speaking to a lot of what we were going through at the time. And, but yeah, it's impressive too. You have almost 400,000 followers, 15 million likes, I think, on all of your content. So
that's crazy.
How long did it take you to get there? Tell us a little bit about.
I was going to ask, when did this all happen? Did it happen overnight, or was it
not quite overnight, but I started. So a little bit of backstory. I was one of those guys that was like, I'm not going to hop on TikTok. I'm conservative, so it's oh, China created it and all that. No way. And then I have a friend that I reconnected with her. I've known her for 15, 20 years now, and she has 4 million followers on TikTok. And so that's when I was like, okay, maybe I need to consider doing this. So I hopped on January of 2022, and the rest is history, basically.
Wow. Yeah. So it is just a little over a year, a little over a year and a half. So that's pretty awesome. So,
yeah.
But obviously I've heard your story, and if Emma doesn't know it, and obviously if our listeners, so you went through a pretty big career transition and really sharing your story and where you were to where you've gotten. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I love sharing with people. The biggest thing that I do in both my businesses really is I want to help the world understand that there's always another option. At the 100,000 foot view, that's really what I'm all about. So I am a product of homeschooling. I have not set foot in a classroom since I was 11 years old. I don't have any high school diploma, no GED, no certificates, no college degree, nothing to show that I'm educated at all. And going through that journey made me realize that there's another way. People get offended when I say this sometimes, but without having education to lean on as a crutch, I kind of needed a different path. And so when I figured out that path, I realized, in my opinion, for most professions, it's a better one. And so that's what my career coaching company is all about, is really pulling back the curtain and helping people not just understand how to write a better resume or how to interview better, but to understand how the hiring industry works. And Katie, you probably have some information about that, what I mean? But, and just help people understand, what is the employers are really looking for? What are businesses really looking for? And let's shine a light on your skills and experience that way, so that the employer will, take a second look at you, basically. So that's me in a nutshell. I've learned it. I've been living it for some 20 years now. And it's something that I really am passionate about, making sure that everyone understands. So
That's awesome. Yeah, that's,
So
I mean,
exciting.
living through it is probably the best like way
Mhm.
to share the experience and learn from it. And that's, I mean, Katie and I take that with us from a different standpoint as far as our business is related to our experience, but the best way to learn something is to go through it. So
Absolutely.
I
Right.
love that.
Well, that, and I would just like, Emma and we've got a bit of an age gap between the two of us. So she's not far removed from college, and I have children in college. So and one thing that I did say, tell them, I told my kids kind of the same thing of like, if you know that you're really like, you really are passionate about a particular thing, like let's say they really wanted to be a lawyer, really wanted to be a doctor, like something that needed that education and it needed that certificate, then by all means, and I'm not discouraging college, but I always told them that that was not, they didn't have to do it. Like if there was something they wanted to pursue, there was something like there were so many avenues, and I came from like the elder millennial where it had just gotten to the point where college was just like the next thing you did, with no real purpose, with no real direction, and really shitty guidance. Like, I mean, I hardly any real guidance. You hear the horror stories of like a guidance counselor really squashing somebody's dreams because they're like, oh, based on X, Y, and Z on a piece of paper, you're probably meant to do this. And it's like, no, I don't know if I don't know if I believe that. And it's just giving people perspective that they have other options. And that's we totally jive. We're on the same page with that 100%.
All right. Well, no, from doing some research with like your TikTok page and kind of just like what you're about, like the whole aspect of telling off your boss, like what really just urged you to make that, like I see it from a marketing standpoint that makes people go, what are you talking about? But like what happened that was like, that's your thing, if that makes
It's
sense.
honestly,
That's your slogan, right?
yeah, in a way. Yeah. So honestly, it's not some big grand story. I really fell into that ass backwards. um so it's a long story, but if we want to talk about growing our social media, I bought a course because so I saw my friend with the 4 million followers. I'm like, okay, how do I do this? Because I've always hated social media. I've always hated promoting my business on social media. This has never been my thing. And so rather than me trying to figure out all on my own, I said, oh, I did what everyone else does and goes and buys a course. And so I was in this Facebook group. I'm getting really frustrated. It's like 3 months I'm on TikTok. I don't feel like I'm getting any traction. I'm in this Facebook group with this course and everyone's talking about how they're getting 20, 40, 60,000 followers in a week. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing wrong? And then I just realized I needed to, if I think about it from a marketing perspective, all marketing is coming up with an idea, testing it, and, iterating on it, right? A/B testing and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, let's get more experimental with my TikTok. So I don't even remember like where I found the first text message on a Reddit thread or something like that. And I just pulled up and was like, hey, let's reenact these exchanges with these employees and these bosses. And the first one blew up. And then I was like, okay, there's something to this. And then I just kept doing them. And now I'm almost, 90 videos into the series. So
that's awesome.
That's exciting.
Definitely.
So kind of taking on like hearing those stories, then obviously as your following grows, you're starting to get people that are like, hey, I have something like that. So now people send you content. Like if you could think of one off the top of your head, like what was probably the most ridiculous scenario that you've been sent by a follower?
Oh man. Oh wow.
There's so many good ones I've seen in the videos.
Yeah. The one that comes to mind is this one lady had they worked in a shop or something like that. And the manager he got upset over something and he just threw a fit and like windows got punched out. There were holes in the walls, stuff got thrown across and and so that was probably the most just crazy, like I can't believe I'm in a situation like this type of thing. That's probably the craziest.
Oh my God, I couldn't even imagine. I'm a person that hates confrontation in the first place. Things start getting broken and I think I turn into, what's his name, Howie from Benchwarmers, where he's like afraid to go anywhere. He doesn't leave. He's afraid of the sun. That'd be me, definitely.
Oh man, yeah. And it seems like a lot of those, like you can kind of tell they're coming from maybe like a retail setting. I don't know if that's just more common in that industry, but you can it's like there's a lot of the videos that I've watched where it's like, oh, you can tell that's probably like maybe a cell phone store, or that's like another type of retail store, where it's just like, they promote a lot of people, I imagine, who just show up all the time into management that have really no people and really no leadership skills. And then that's the end result.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I've been watching your new channel with like where you're focusing more on the career coaching and like helping
Mhm.
people get interviews with opportunities that they're really looking for. And me being on the other side, being a recruiter and also coaching business owners how to find the right people. I think if you had people like you and like I working more together, it's like, let's get to the real information that you really need to know about somebody and the real information about the job, because I've always felt the interview process is like, who's the better liar, because they're trying to, this person over here is trying to inflate their background and experience. And, they on a, resumes is basically a sales letter. But then on the flip side, you have hiring companies who are just as dishonest and sometimes maybe not even intentionally about the culture and the responsibilities and how the pay structure works.
Mhm.
So what are some of the, I mean, I've seen some of in the video, but like share with the audience, like what are some of the biggest struggles that you see in that game that we call like the hiring process?
I love that you called it a game, because that's exactly what I coach people it is,
100%.
right? Like it's so what I tell people, anyone that comes to work with me, I always tell them that, what you're about to venture into is very much a game. And what I'm here to do is help you understand the rules to the game so that you not only can play the game better, but you can exploit the rules.
Yeah.
So like that's very much what I teach people. In terms of what I encounter, it's really amazing to me that like I review hundreds of resumes every year from people that want my help. And without exception, they are less than a 30% match for the job every single time. And so what I've discovered just with my own anecdotal statistics is that no one out in the job market understands how to write a really effective resume. And so that's one of the things I was talking about earlier, like referring back to what I was saying about this is information that the world needs to hear. That's one of the things I really am focused on, is helping people understand what does a real resume, a really good one, truly look like. But that's the biggest one across the board, is no one knows. And I've seen some terrible ones that like, just, I can't believe that someone made it through high school and made it through their career and they're 40 years old making a resume like these. It boggles my mind. It's so, but anyway, so when then people get the right information and I start hearing, stories about, here, I mean, I had a guy a couple weeks back. He took my resume writing course, and he had never had a traditional job in his life, so he never had to write a resume before in his life. And he took my course to figure it out, and he got a job working remote, which is exactly what he wanted, making more money than he ever has in his life.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the whole thing is like I really want people to understand really how far they can really go with the resume, and that's the biggest thing that most people struggle with.
Yep. I have people ask me that all of the time, where I'm not a professional resume writer. I don't claim to be. I don't sell it. So if somebody reaches out to me and they're like, "Hey, I know that you're a recruiter. What type of opportunities do you have right now?" If I don't have it, I don't promise them that I can put them in front of anybody either. But the resume side of things, like I at least kind of have it from the perspective of viewing a million resumes over the course of a month, So, and again, your ATS there are ATS systems out there that we use that are way more sophisticated than others. But, I'm at least going into it with maybe a set of eyes will see your resume. So here's what I would change. And most recently, I had somebody who I was like, I would change these 3 things. Because he was like, I think I've applied for 80 jobs. I've not gotten a call. I've not gotten an email. I've not gotten a text message. So I was like, well, here, this from what I'm looking at as somebody that reviews resumes, here's 3 things I would change. And he had an interview the next week, and plus I'm not even claiming that I'm that good at it, but you can, like, I think if you had people that could meet in the middle to help just the job market in general, it's like we need 100 or 1,000 people like us that can go out there and really say, hey, how can we all work together and help these companies fill the positions, but also help these people get an opportunity for something that they may not think, or maybe they do think that they are actually qualified for the job, but a software is kicking them out, which is probably the most frustrating thing.
And the most common, really. That's the thing that when I work with people, that's the biggest thing they struggle with is they feel like they're qualified. They feel like they really know what they're doing in their craft. Right. They know their profession, but they get really discouraged and really frustrated with the fact that they apply to 80, 100, 200, 300 jobs and they're not getting a single interview. And so by the time they come to me, they're pretty despondent and they feel like, maybe like, tell me what I'm doing wrong, because I don't know what else to do other than go apply for a job down the street at Walmart or the grocery store, something like that. And these are people that they're marketers, they're in advertising, they're in PR. There's all these talented people and they don't know what they're doing wrong. And it's just the way. So then, they feel like they start downing themselves, and that negative voice in the back of their head starts telling them, you can't do this. It's not possible, or something's wrong. And it's just how they're presenting themselves. And so that's the first thing I always tell people is there is nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with just the way you're portraying your career, your experience, your skills.
Yeah.
And once you fix that, like most of my clients end up getting interviews to the majority of the jobs they apply to, which doesn't happen too often, but getting that skill of resume writing and perfecting that approach is really what changes lives.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people struggle if they've been in a position for a really long time. And like if you've not been in the job market, it changes so often. So, actually staying up on, okay, I mean, if you would have told me, I don't know, 15 years ago that a software would be pretty much filtering through resumes that are submitted to certain companies, I would have been like, really? Like, and I'm sure that happened then, probably not to the sophistication that it does now, but you don't really think about that when you're not in the job market.
Yeah.
And people, and I think some of it too, like you talked about, they're not presenting themselves well. They're likely not giving themselves the right kind of credit. And I think some of that has to do with the mindset when they're in, if they're either unhappy or laid off or, terminated for some reason, like that plays a lot into it too.
Yeah, I would say so.
One of the things that I talk with hiring companies on the flip side of that, like you had talked about recruiting being a game, and like I try to encourage them to remove the nonsense out of the process. Like, you start talking about panel interviews, group Zoom interviews for certain types of positions. I'm like, well, certain types of positions that's not going to work for. And I had a client one time who would intentionally omit just the common courtesies of confirming the location of an interview, where they're like, well, if they really want the job, they'll figure it out. I'm like, do you want them to show up to the wrong place? Like, this is setting a bad tone for your relationship. These are still people. Like, this isn't a game. This isn't like hoops for them to jump through or a puzzle that they have to solve. You have a need. They have a skill set. So why are you making this harder, not only on them, but yourself? So that's one thing I try to push people past. Have you, like, hearing it, I'm sure, from clients, have you had anybody fairly recently that maybe they've gotten in front of an opportunity that they thought they wanted, but then you find out the company still has like either 75 steps to their hiring process, or that they still have to go through some sort of game or step in the process that they really weren't expecting?
Yeah, it's interesting. If I think about my own clients, I honestly can't think of anyone, and I think I'm not sure. I can't say for sure why that is. I've had my own experiences with that where I felt like I was put to the test for sure.
Right.
But any of my clients, I've not gotten that feedback from any of them lately.
Good.
And I think the job market's shifting in that way. I think people are starting to realize, owners or managers or whoever they are starting to realize, like, to your point, Katie, like the negative tone that they set and the precedent they're creating is like, sometimes it's an employee market. Sometimes it's a company market. You know what I mean? And coming off things like the pandemic, where people are accustomed to working remotely more and more of the job market, they're accustomed to that. I think companies have realized it's kind of knocked them down a peg, where they feel the need that they shouldn't be putting people to the test so much and putting them through the ringer just for them to get a job, because employees have a little bit more leverage where companies are more willing to let them work from home. And so why do they need to go to this company that's putting them through the ringer and putting them through all these arbitrary tests when they shouldn't have to, when there's 3 other opportunities lined up somewhere else? Right.
Yeah, that I 100% agree with. And one of the things too, like if it's competitive, so like let's say you have a position that's fairly competitive, meaning there's a ton of other companies with the same type of opportunity, or it's a high volume type of position, like you have to remove that nonsense and be a little bit more open-minded. Because if the difference is, if you're like, well, 10 years ago I was able to fill these positions with no problem, well, if you can't now, then you have to change. Like, you got to change the way that you're doing it. So yeah, it's one of those things that's always interesting. It's never boring. Like if you're involved in recruiting or hiring on either aspect, it's never boring.
Yeah.
I was going to say, given my experience with the working world, it's very little, very, very little. But what's so crazy is that when Katie and I started this business, my dad's been working since he was 15 years old, I think. And it's always been like, you do what your boss says. You don't ever go against the system. You show up at your 9 to 5, you stay at the desk all hours of the day, like just fly under the radar, but obey everything at the same time. And when we started this business, he thinks that like extremely rich people have to start businesses, or the only people that can start businesses. And it was so weird to see, like, he was upset because the previous place I was working, I was going against the system. and kind of like pushing the limits a little bit to see what I could effectively communicate, and then taking the leap. He was like, oh my God, what are you doing? It was just like this big freak out, because he's always been you listen to your boss, you follow the rules, like don't ever stray from the script kind of thing. And it's crazy to see how many people now are more comfortable with going, well, these are my boundaries as an employee to my employer, and like pushing the limit and seeing what they can adjust to make it an effective workplace.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So
absolutely. I love this topic, actually. So like one of my most popular pieces of content outside of my Bad Boss videos was this video I posted around education and the fallacies of the education system. Me coming through the way that I did with my, non-traditional education, as a teenager, even I remember being curious, like I observed, and I didn't have a clear picture on like what I was observing with public education, but like something just seemed off to me. And so one of the things I remember doing even as a teenager was doing the research around like, where did our education system really like come from? What happened? How did it come to be what it is? And so this is when you start getting to discussions around the industrial age and things like that. And so to me, it's so fascinating, Emma, that's what you recognize with your dad. And this isn't to like talk negatively of him at all, but like that is very much an industrial age mindset where we got to allow ourselves to be the cog in the machine to just get by in life. Right. And like, that's what the industrial format of education was designed to do, is to make us participate and I hate to say it, but conform, so that we can just, get plugged into the machine, and then the machine runs well, but then it's the machine that benefits and not us.
Right. Exactly.
I'm so passionate about that. It's such a huge topic, and I'm loving in this day and age in 2023, finally, like I think more people are becoming aware that that's what it is. And that's why entrepreneurship is such a popular, I don't want to say trend, but it's like getting more popular now for that reason. People are realizing there's other opportunities. There's more out there than you just getting plugged into a system and having to conform and obey, right? There's more to life, more to work than that.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I see it's younger. I feel like that trend is reaching younger and younger generations, because I mean, my boyfriend works for a company that helps create courses to market and sell for people that invest. And there was a 17-year-old, I believe, that invested. It was a course on how to play video games or something. And he's a millionaire at 17, like crazy stuff like that you can get a hold of at such a young age, and let it change your course. I guess my dad sort of has that mentality of like, you start at the bottom, you work your way up, and keep conforming. So yeah, it's crazy.
So many people like that. It's just systemic. And that's, I think like with the education system, there are so many school districts, and I mean, maybe there are some that they have it available, but I think when I was in school, I think of my my son's, he's a senior, there's so many, it's like, why don't they teach that in school? Why don't you have a course on basic business ownership, on just some of the basic things that you could start taking that in college? But honestly, some of the college classes are not even that well developed. I mean, I remember interviewing creatives over the last 5-6 years. You get so many different levels. They're like, well, I have a marketing degree. And it's like, well, that's great, but what did you really learn? And then you have some schools that they really focus on being modern and up to date. And then you have some schools where it's like, they're teaching you how green means healthy, and like, different colors of branding, like your real basic stuff. My son told me, I think it was yesterday at dinner, that he's taking like a intro to like business ownership. They offer that at the high school level. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I'm like, something that I'll be talking to him about more, just to see like, to what level do they really teach that? Because again, you're just pumping out more people to go into the workforce is really what it, it's really what it's about.
I had a professor in college, my freshman year, for a math class. And he was like, I know a lot of you have to take this class. You're not really here because you're you want to get a job that has to use math. And he had said, okay, is anybody studying to be da 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 da? And he listed off these job descriptions or job positions, and nobody raised their hand. He's like, good, we're not even going over this chapter then. I'm not even going to waste my time. And I was like, you're a real one for that, because none of us are here for that. Why would we want to learn? And there's so many things that if I look back and think about it, that I learned that I don't use to this day. There's no purpose for it. But also thinking back and going, most history classes from the 5th grade up until you're a senior in high school go over the same courses of
Mhm.
history. And it's like, what's new? We've already gone over this. What else do we have to learn? So anyway, that's speaking of education. Sorry, kind of ranted a little bit, but
No, you're preaching to the choir.
yeah,
So,
I
yeah.
know.
I mean, I
I'm
would
only
say,
25, but
I mean, I'm in the same boat that you are, Braxton. Everything that I've learned from entrepreneurship, mentoring, coaching, leadership, marketing, I've sought out and found.
Mhm.
Like I've either worked with a coach, I've worked with a program, I've taken a course, or I have found somebody who is at a certain level that I mentor and learn from. But like none of it's been traditional. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you can, like, that stuff's out there. Some people just don't know. Like if they've just put their head down and went to work, they just don't know, and they might be that person who in the back of their mind is like, I should be doing something else. But you just need to see that there's that opportunity to do something else.
Yeah. I remember being really young, and I'm a big nerd, so I loved going to libraries as a kid, even into high school. And I mean, I didn't attend high school, but when I was a teenager, I loved always going to libraries. And I remember being a teenager, and I was old enough to drive, and I'm driving down the library, and I remember just walking around the library feeling like there's something I have an itch for, but I don't even know what it is. And I would just walk around the library trying to find a book I felt like interested me, but I had a hard time finding it. And I realized later down, as an adult, that what I was really looking for was just having some direction to create my own thing. And it really ended up being entrepreneurship in my case. But like, that's what I found. I went through that in looking at that experience for myself and looking at what other kids go through at that age. It's not all that different. And what I realize is, I think the system in some ways conditions us to almost not look another direction. You know what I mean? Like we need to keep our blinders on and just focus on what we're told and what we're taught, and then we'll be okay. That's kind of the promise. Like go to school, you can get a good job, right? How long have we heard? How many generations have we heard that?
Right.
I see it so pervasively. And it's really funny because I actually live in a college town. And so seeing this happen, like I had a client not too long back where he had graduated with a marketing degree of all things, like the most in-demand job there is, right?
Right.
And he had been graduated for 7 years and still couldn't find his first job in marketing. And I'm like, what? Like, you're a marketer. How can you not market yourself in the job market? Like, what is happening with you? And what I discovered was, like, I asked him, what have you been doing with your time trying to break into this field? And he's like, well, my career counselor said. And I'm like, well, I thought I was your career counselor. He's like, no, my college one. And I'm like, it's been 7 years. You're still going to your college career counselor.
Ooh,
And I'm
yeah.
like, he's like, yeah. And she told me all this stuff. And so then he listed all these things that she was telling him to do and not to do. And I'm like, oh, you've been done just the greatest disservice I've ever heard.
Wouldn't you
So,
think like after the first couple years, you'd be like, I might not be taking her advice anymore.
right? Like the definition of insanity is do the same thing and expect different results, right?
Right.
Like but I see that so commonly. It's a long story, but I go to church with someone. I had a small event outside my office and had speakers up and I was blaring music and stuff. And she happened to come by my office, and she's a recent grad of the college here. And she's like, what are you doing here? I didn't know, like, what's this? And I was like, oh, I'm just having a little event for my business and stuff. She's like, oh, what's your business? And so I explained it to her, and she's like, I'm a career coach. And she's like, did you go to, what's your degree? And like, I can't remember what it was, like operational consulting or something like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I didn't go to college. And she just went, ooh, like, what? And like, okay. It was like that really awkward moment where she's like, okay, bye. And she like just kind of scuttles away, And it's just so funny to see, even now, while this trend of like breaking away from, the norm, the status quo, some people still have, even at that age in their early 20s, still have this hold on them about like, oh, that's not the way you go about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's so crazy for me to observe it.
Yeah. Well, you were talking, I was thinking of a question, like you were mentioning like some like commonalities. What are like, with as long as you've been doing career coaching, have you started to notice some commonalities in your clients that are struggling, like a couple top things where you can see like usually they're all struggling from X?
Absolutely. So I mentioned resumes. That's
Right.
like that's the one for everyone. But other commonalities, other things I see really common. This even extends to like directors and VPs and executives that I coach.
Yeah.
Is everyone suffers from imposter syndrome. It's a human condition. And I won't say who it was, but there's a VP at a very well-known tech company that I was coaching a couple months back. And he came to me saying like, I don't know how I can belong in this room with all these other people. He was a VP at
Wow.
at a huge public publicly traded tech company. And so we got to talking, and he basically just felt like he was a really little fish in a big pond, and he didn't know how he could stack up to all the other, directors and VPs that he was rubbing shoulders with at his company. And so my point is that like none of this, that imposter syndrome, that feeling of we're not good enough, or we're not going to make it, or whatever it is, it's no one is exempt from it. Everyone suffers from this. So we might as well just ignore it. And, I call it the demon in the back of our head, right? We just need to tell the demon in the back of our head to shut up and not listen to it and just plow forward because everyone suffers from this. And it's kind of like that whole meme, like, from The Incredibles, like if everyone's super, then no one is. Well, the way I look at it is if everyone is suffering from imposter syndrome, then no one needs to.
Yep. Well, that's a great line.
That's gonna be the quote graphic.
Right, it is.
I mentioned earlier, and not that I need to do this now, but being an emotional person when it comes to working, I don't know, dealing with your boss, whatever it may be. At my previous place of employment, it was just a train wreck, and it was constant anxiety and having that emotion brought into it because I didn't feel security. But I know I'm not the only one that feels that way at their job, or it was my job, but you get what I'm saying. How do you handle people that are emotional when it comes to having that effective communication in the workplace? Like how do you navigate that, someone to communicate effectively?
It's hard because a lot of times you're at the mercy of your leader, right? And so like the way your leader responds to you and you as a person in the workplace says a lot about the company that you work for, I think. So sometimes it's not avoidable. You're going to have to deal with that stuff, and there's not a clear, easy solution to it. I've walked out on companies. Like this is ultimately why I started my businesses, because I got tired of abusive, uncaring bosses. You know what I mean? Like that's why I'm so passionate about my TikTok content, is because like that's very real for me. So there's not always a hard and fast silver bullet answer to that. I think a lot of times someone in that position needs to have leadership where leadership is taking one-on-one time. Like I'm a big fan of 360-degree feedback for that reason. Like have a check-in with your leader once a week, once a month, no more, don't let it go any longer than that. And if your leader isn't doing that with you and creating that environment where it's okay for you to have that open communication, then find out first if that's something you can request of them. And if not, then I think, the writing's on the wall in terms of what you're doing at your company and what your company is like. Something else, I worked at a tech company and they definitely had their flaws. One of the neat things that they did, and all tech companies are newfangled and they try to do all these quirky, things and have all these quirky perks and stuff. But one of the things every employee was required to do was to take the real colors test. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but it's basically a personality test that determines what your communication style is. And there's 4. And I got to remember them: orange, green, blue, and gold. And so when everyone came into the company, once part of your orientation was to take this test, and then you were branded as whatever color you were. And it's like, it's labeled on your cubicle or your desk or wherever it is that you work. And like everyone knows everyone's colors, and knowing everyone's colors helped have the right communication so that the blues, who tend to be more emotional, and Emma, I think it's ironic that you're wearing, a blue sweatshirt when you say that you're emotional, because that's what
my
blues
blue
are.
cup. It's written everywhere. The blue light, blue sweatshirt, blue cup.
Blues are the emotional ones. And so like, as a gold people, they tend to be very administrative and very type A and stuff like that. So sometimes golds have to tone it down a little bit when they're talking to the blues. But in that tech company where I worked, everyone knew that. Everyone understood that. So that's something, like, I'm not saying, everyone has to go out and take the real colors test, but it is the onus of the leadership to make sure that open and honest communication is happening. And if you, as someone working at that company, are not receiving that, then, a heart-to-heart has to happen with your leader in some way. So again, no really silver bullet answer, but just understanding how your leader communicates. And if there's an opportunity for communication to be facilitated in a better way, I think is a good place to start.
Okay, I like that. That's like, I'm thinking of that the color system. I also would think, as someone that's, I guess the gold is the more direct administrative communication. I feel like that person would also get kind of annoyed feeling like they have to like switch it up and like, let me go into this a little more gentle with the blue people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How was that ever a thing, or was that, am I just overthinking it?
No, I think it's funny. Like everyone, if you are having some sort of conversation with a leader or a peer, it didn't really matter. Like at that company that I worked at, it almost became like a running joke that you would say, "Oh, I'm just being blue today," or something like that. Like today's a blue day for me, and for me personally, like I'm almost an even orange and green. So green tend to be the very analytical, super nerdy types, and oranges they tend to be athletes. They're the go-getters. They're the very motivated, like high energy people. So I'm almost a very even orange and green. And so it's really funny because like when you're talking, and this isn't the end all be all, but when you're talking and like, oranges tend to be like take over the conversation because they get excited and stuff like that. And so then blues start feeling like left out or excluded, right? And so like, but when everyone can just almost have fun and joke about the fact of what their personality and their communication style is, it almost creates an environment where it allows you, whatever color you are, to be conscious of who you are and how you may be benefiting someone else in that communication. And so it's almost a very natural, I guess what I'm saying is it's a very natural way of being able to manage communication when you create some sort of system or structure where it's easy to talk about it in that way. And the more clear you are about it, the easier communication can happen for that reason.
Yep.
That's interesting.
So kind of mentioning that assessment, that's something that they take while they're employed. How do you feel about pre-employment assessments of any type? Because I know you did a video, you had talked about one of your experiences of taking like a personality assessment and then a skills assessment and then testing your work in another area where it's like, okay, now that this is probably becoming a little excessive just to get an interview. So how do you feel about those, and where do you kind of draw the line?
I think like I love personality tests. I don't think they are, like I said earlier, I don't think they're the end all be all like a lot of people tend to treat them, right? I think ultimately if I'm orange, just for an example, like, but I need to be more blue, I can be more blue if I need to be, even though that's my lowest. But but like, and so I think it's the same thing as like, I remember and I might have, Katie, this might be the content you're referring to, but I remember one of the first job I ever had that I worked remotely, it was a tiny company. They're barely doing $1 million a year. I was employee number 5 and I reported directly to the CEO. And when I took the DISC assessment that he gave me, he was I can't believe how thrilled he was with the fact that our assessments were quite similar. And I know as a business owner that's exactly what you don't want. You don't want someone to be, your twin at your company. You need someone that complements you better. And so that's another reason why I think putting too much weight in personality tests and making decisions based off of that is not the best idea. The real colors at the company I worked at, I loved it because it was all about communication, and that's where it stopped. There was no expectations or anything. Your job wasn't defined by it or anything like that. It was just to help people communicate more, nothing else. But when I took that job with that, 5-person company, all of the expectations were piled on me because of the fact that that's what my assessment looked like. And that's ultimately why I ended up leaving over was expectations were not communicated. They were implied, but the implication can get lost in translation between boss and subordinate. So
100%. Assessment that I utilize has a DISC portion in it, but I try to tell people like, hey, this gets you an idea of like, is this person going to thrive in your environment or not? And it's going to give you information to have a better interview process. Like you're going to go in with some information to communicate with these people better, to know what might get them excited, and where you can have more relevant questions as opposed to like, dumb questions where, if they say, well, if you'd be any animal, what would you be and why? Like, who cares? That's not relevant to the job. Like, I mean, I want to know what your favorite color is once you're employed. So, for employee gifts or something has no relevance in the interview process whatsoever. So I try to tell people, like, if you're too hard-nosed on these assessments, you're probably going to miss out on talking to somebody who really can bring a lot of value to the table. But I try not to use them as a filter. It's not what they're designed for.
Yeah.
I
think it's funny. Like no assessment will tell you what kind of work ethic someone has.
Right.
It'll tell you what their personality is, what they have a tendency to be or to do, but
Not
not
in real
anything.
time, because you can have people who get completely demotivated and choose to be lazy, like not likely in the beginning of their employment, but that could be completely counter, like it'd be opposite of what their assessment says, but that's just a choice. So yeah, it gets you like in the right stratosphere is what I always said, and you can have more intelligent conversation and know how to speak to someone, how they want to be communicated with. So I think that's the value on that. So on the personal side of things, this is where Emma kind of takes the lead on the next part of the podcast. We kind of talk a little bit more of the fun lighthearted stuff.
Cool.
Yes. So I always ask, because I think everybody that we have on the podcast is an entrepreneur. So as an entrepreneur, you're working different hours, longer hours, shorter hours, whatever it may be. Whenever you're not working, what are you doing? What can you find yourself doing?
Oh man. We oh boy. We live in Idaho and we bought a camper about 2 years ago. So we love camping as a family.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's always fun. And I'm very fortunate. Like I love the scenery, I love the recreation. I can see the Grand Teton Mountains from my backyard. So that's pretty fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So there's that. This is something a lot of people don't know about me. So I'm glad you asked the question, because I don't get this question very often. But when I was, I think I was 18, I was in ballroom dance for a few years. And so
Really?
I actually love to dance. Yeah. I've kind of lost some of the talent a little bit, but it's always been like a big passion of mine as well. So I love social dance and things like that.
Have you ever played
That's
Two
awesome.
Truths, One Lie as like an icebreaker?
I have not played it, but I know what it is.
So
I was going to say, he's a very versatile person. It sounds like he can get away with a lot.
well, but what's funny is that competitive ballroom dancer was always one of my lies, but that's like one I used all the time when I would meet new people.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Katie, just knowing you as a person.
What?
So funny
Oh yeah.
to try and see you as a competitive ballroom dancer.
No, but I always used to throw that in there just to see what people would say. But yeah, it's funny.
Awesome.
No, that's
one
awesome.
of our segments, I was going to say, one of our segments that we like to do is like, what's your favorite TikTok right now? And I feel like it's fitting, given that you're popular on TikTok.
Right.
What's the funniest or the most interesting, or like, what's your favorite right now?
Yeah. So it's funny. My other hobby is really just entrepreneurship. Like I love sitting down and building sales pages. Like that's not just my business. I nerd out doing that kind of stuff. So I love following Shark Tank, and I love Marcus Lemonis and The Prophet. So like all my favorite TikTokers are in that space as well.
Oh, okay.
If I had to think of a couple, I think the first one that I really loved, she was really big long before I discovered her on TikTok, but I love Cody Sanchez. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah, I think so.
She's the boring business lady. She talks about investing in boring businesses and stuff like that. I love her stuff. Actually, probably my favorite right now, I also just love Alex Hormozy. That dude's just such a stud.
Oh yeah, I've met him.
Yeah. Have you really?
Yeah, I did. I recruited before they still own the company, but Gym Launch, I recruited for them. They were a client of mine. Yeah, a couple years ago. Yeah, well, a few years, more than a couple years ago. It's probably been like.
Who's the fangirl now?
I was just thinking that myself. Like I know.
No, I remember I did Zoom calls with Layla, and the recruiting team that they had at the time, and they had pretty dang good recruiters. So I think what we were doing is I was recruiting another recruiter. They were growing their recruiting team, and so they were focusing on bringing in more trainers, and then. It was he's at a different level now. I probably haven't even talked to anybody on that team in a few years, but I met him through a whole like network of business coaches at the time. So we worked with, I can't believe I'm blanking on the guy's name. I see his face, but that's how we met Alex Hormozy.
Was it like Dean Graziosi or someone like that?
No, Alex Sharfin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So he did, and he does very much like operational coaching. He's kind of has his own entrepreneur like scaling system. Went to one of their events, but yeah, I follow him on LinkedIn. I follow him and Layla on LinkedIn just because they put out consistent content on that platform, and I'm a big LinkedIn nerd.
She's ashamed of my LinkedIn, and I'm social media, but more Facebook, Instagram, TikTok savvy. Yeah, the stuff that can be entertainment. LinkedIn, Such a drag. I mean, I know it, but it's such a drag.
Turning into the new Facebook if you watch a lot of the content.
I've been saying that same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
I was gonna say to tie it up, we'll finish it off with this last little kind of segment. So we like to talk about what grinds our gears. What's like something that it could be personal, it could be business, it could be whatever.
just something that's come up in like the last week.
Something that just fuels your hate fire. Let's hear it.
So there's two things that come to mind. I'll share both if you want, but I'll stick to one at least. So I have a personal one and a professional one. I get a lot of people that come to me wanting coaching, and oh man, this is gonna like probably turn a lot of people off from looking me up, but I'm gonna say it anyway. People come to me wanting to have, one of the things I am also is I'm a blue check certified expert on the Intro app. I'm not sure if you guys know what that is, but like it's like Masterclass meets FaceTime. So like they're
you kind of have a stage spotlight time.
Yeah, it's an app where you can have one-to-one coaching conversations with thought leaders. So like the guy that founded Zillow, the founder of Reddit is on there, people like that. So I'm on there with them. Cool. And people will come to me wanting to have like thinking I can just deliver to them the golden answer to whatever challenge they have on a silver platter, and they think I can do it in 15 minutes. And so that's really difficult. So a lot of people come to me. Basically, the pet peeve is people wanting to have an answer for something that is
they want
really
instant gratification.
And they want something that really, as a coach, I would pull out of them rather than me give to them, if that makes sense. So that's probably my biggest like grinds my gears is like, you gotta, going back to expectations, right? Like you gotta understand I'm not gonna solve all your problems in 15 minutes for you.
Right.
No kidding. Like what's the personal one? Let's hear the personal one.
Yeah.
Sorry, Katie, I cut you off.
Oh, man.
No, you're fine.
I've been with my wife for 15 years, and
congratulations.
Thank you. And my stuff disappears a lot, and I hate when I can't find it. And it's because she likes to reorganize things, and that's just one thing that has never stopped really. So I'll be looking around the house. It could be anything. Maybe we're going camping, and I'm trying to find a certain pair of pants to wear camping, or it could be something for my truck, or it could be something for my backpack, or it could be whatever it is. Honey, have you seen this? No, I haven't. And then I spend an hour trying to find it, and then I find it, and she's like, oh yeah, I did put that there.
Oh man.
So yeah, love her to death.
I can relate to that. Except mine, I live with my boyfriend and his 5-year-old son, and you would think the 5-year-old would be bad about this, given that he plays Nintendo and he's got an iPad. All of my charging cords to everything go missing. And what's so funny is that, especially, and this is another thing too, to add on top of it, we've been in this house a month. And when we were moving, like I packed up all my nerdy stuff in a nice and neat box. It was my Xbox. It was my like podcast stuff. All the cords are in there. I'm like, nobody's going to hurt this thing. I'm taking it myself. Like, was just like very protective over this. Well, I told him, I was like, well, there's room in here if you want to throw, he's a PlayStation guy, which is, I don't even want to get into it. He puts his PlayStation in there, but he packs very last minute. I had been packing like weeks prior, right? Getting it all done. He likes to throw everything and go. And I'm like, no, I want to know where everything is. So I know it makes unpacking 10 times easier. Anyway, I go to finally unpack my Xbox in this house, and all of the cords that were so nice and neatly put in this box are suddenly gone. And somebody's PlayStation has already been unpacked, set up, and been played on. And so I go upstairs. I'm like, hey, where are my cords? And he's the worst liar ever. But he's like, I don't know. I'm like looking behind the TV and all that stuff. And he's like, oh, I think there's some other cords in the closet downstairs. I go downstairs and I find all these white cords that match everything that my Xbox would need and my TV. And PlayStations are white and my Xbox is black, and 2 and 2 are coming together. And I'm like, really? Last I checked, I had all this proof, like, you stole my cords and you didn't say anything. And all you had to do was say that you did. Point me in the direction of the other ones.
It's how old I sound. Do those cords actually interchange now on modern systems? Because back when
I didn't know that. I've been playing video games since I was like 5. It was like, GameCube and all the old systems too that were before me.
Right.
And knowing that but I didn't realize that PlayStation and Xbox are pretty much interchangeable. It's an HDMI cord.
They weren't when they first came out.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
We own video game stores, and we had tubs of just power cords for an Xbox, like the first one, and just power cords for the PlayStation 2. So that's like, you can blame Sony and Microsoft for that, for him stealing your cord.
Yeah.
Because if this would have been like 20 years ago, that wouldn't have happened, because every single cord was
no
different.
chance. Anyway, I can relate to stuff going missing, because the only thing that goes missing of mine, given that I live with two boys, it's not like they're taking my clothes or makeup or anything.
Right.
So they go for the video games. I'm like, this is the one thing I can relate with you guys on, is freaking video games, and you're ruining it for me.
That's so funny. That's my boys with their mom. My boys know better to take my charging cables and stuff, but my wife's always disappears.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're in the same bucket.
Mine happens when we're camping. So like, I will have my backpack with me because I'll work while we're camping, but it seems like I will find all of the charging cords in one bunk bed of the camper. So that's because my son is like, I can't find mine, I'll grab this one. And then I go and dig another one out of my bag, and then he can't find it again, and it ends up in the bunk bed of the camper.
You know what's almost as frustrating is, it's actually more frustrating, if you're stealing my iPhone charger for your iPhone, okay, I get it. But and he quit vaping, by the way, we'll start there. He's quit, which shout out to him for quitting. But Cole would take my laptop charger because it was the same plug for a vape. And I'd see my laptop charger plugged into a vape, and I'm like, are we kidding here?
Yeah.
You know how many vapes you could buy that charger is worth?
Right.
Yes.
Braxton, I think when she moved in, so Emma and Cole just moved into this house just a few weeks ago. They've only been in this house. So
it's been a month. Yeah.
It's been like, so yeah, I guess, close about a month, because you've only filmed so many podcasts in the new setup. Where I remember the day that you moved in and you were unpacking your office, you were freaking out because we had to record, and same thing, cords were missing. It wasn't in the right box.
But that's the only thing that ever goes missing in mine. I swear.
Just
And it's every day.
cords.
I could say it till I'm blue in the face. Do not touch this. Do not take this cord. It's gone the next day.
Oh,
anyway.
Funny.
All right. Well, thank you, Braxton, for being on. It's been a pleasure.
Been great.
He's TikTok famous, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you want to hear a topic, if you need any advice, if you just want to chat and say hi, you can always message us on Instagram at F__K your pod, or you can email me at Emma@99creatives or Katy at
99 creatives.
Braxton, where can they find you?
Yeah, I think if you just go to go.braxtonwood.vip, that's where everything I do is all on that one page.
Perfect.
Beautiful. You guys hear that? VIP. He's a very important person. Anyway, so thank you again for being on, and thank you to those that are listening, and don't forget to do the damn thing. Okay, bye.
Adios.